Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 8:37. It's O'Connor and Company with Larry and Patrice. And let's get right to it with KT McFarland, because, Patrice, we've got a lot of stuff going on around the world, and obviously, most specifically, the current status of the Israel-Iran conflict and whether the U.S. should have any level of employment beyond what we've already done. Joining us is KT McFarland. KT, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning. Glad to be with you.
So President Trump yesterday made what I think is a rather remarkable revelation that isn't actually getting picked up much, that Iran offered to come to Washington, D.C. to meet with the president in America. That's rather unprecedented, isn't it?
Yeah, but then it was immediately denied by the Iranian spokesman. So the question I've got is, who's talking? Here's why President Trump is so good at this. He's not going to be rushed into a decision. Events are still playing themselves out. And the two events that you have to look at that are still playing themselves out are Israel. What's Israel able to do? How are they able to further degrade Iran's capability to retaliate, to harm anybody, to have any kind of military whatsoever that's left? The other thing they've got to be looking at is, okay, so what are the Ayatollahs doing? The Ayatollah's been pretty clear. He's doubling down. But he's also 86 years old. He's got, terminal cancer, and he's one of the revolutionary guys. So he'll go down with the ship. He's going to sacrifice. He doesn't mind if he dies in the cause. But you got to wonder, what about the other people in the unit? What about the other people in that inner circle and inner sanctum? Are they saying, well, I'm 40 years old and I've got children. Do I really want to go down with the ship? And so I was fascinated to hear President Trump saying, yeah, they even want to come to Washington. That probably means that someone in the leadership cadre has gone to a third party, Qatar, wherever, and said, look, maybe we should negotiate. So again, these events are all playing themselves out. President Trump knows that he's got his options lined up, and he'll make the decision at the very last moment when the details of this are clearer, and then he won't hesitate.
KT, it's been interesting to see how silent the axis of evil are. All the Iran's good buddies, China, Russia. I mean, I guess Russia has its handful already, but are you surprised at how all these bad guys are just sitting by quietly? Do they just not want smoke from President Trump?
Well, here's the thing. As you point out, Patrice, Russia's kind of preoccupied, right? It's got its own problems in Ukraine. China is all about China. I mean, talk about China first policy. They're not going to do anything to help anybody unless they feel that there's a definite advantage to themselves. And although China gets a lot of its oil from Iran, it doesn't really have any. I mean, what else? They get oil from Russia. They get oil from other places. So I think China may be talking to the Iranians, but they're not going to send in the Marines. They're not going to do anything that would potentially jeopardize them. And I would also point out that President Trump is not going to send in the Marines. What he's looking at is there a one and done? Can we help them in one, say, military bombing operation, and then we're done? It makes all the difference, and then it's in a different place.
Is there a scenario that one and done happens and the nuclear threat is minimized, if not ended, and there isn't regime change? I mean, because there's other voices that say, okay, and then the Ayatollahs have to go, and of course I don't think the president is interested in instigating that, but it could happen just spontaneously because of the strikes. And then what happens? Is this a military government? Is there a republic that is born out of this? Because anyone in Iran has been living for 50 years in the kind of authoritarian, theocratic propaganda. I mean, it's not like there's a good guy waiting to take their place, is there?
Well, remember, the Iranian people is a very young population. I think 70% of the population is under 35. They're well educated. They're very internet savvy, which is one of the reasons the first thing that the Ayatollahs did, they shut down the internet. And then Elon Musk opened up Starlink so they can talk to each other now. And every 8 or so years, that population goes to the streets and anti-regime protests and demonstrations. This is not a popular government. This is not a popular regime.
But they've been
blows it up?
educated to hate America, haven't they? They've been educated to hate Israel.
Yeah, but how long is that brain? You don't know. Look, we don't know. We're not doing public opinion polls. We don't have guys taking the temperature inside. But one of the things we're pretty clear on is that the Iranian people are not happy with their government, not because of Israel, not because of nukes, but because of the way the government has so mismanaged the economy. There's very high inflation. There's shortages of goods. So will there be regime change? If there is, we're not going to lead it. We learned our lesson in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we should have learned it in Vietnam. As President Trump says, and he says time and again, and he said it when he was in the Middle East a month ago, he said, you choose your own leaders. We're not going to tell you how to think or what kind of government to have or how to worship your God. You do that. You're on your own. So if there is a regime change, not brought on by us, and they're the ones in charge of it. And if you look at where does regime change really work, Eastern Europe is the perfect example, right? It was the people themselves that did it, and they have great governments now.
All right.
Okay.
KT, we got to leave it there. We're up against it now, but thank you for joining us on a very busy
Thanks, KT.
day.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
8:42.